Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cassandra Lunch. This is the 77th Cassandra Lunch, and today, it looks like our title didn't get updated. Arpan Patel is going to be presenting on, I believe it's Standalone CQLSH into DataStax Astra. And the organizers for this event are Rahul Singh, Arpan Patel, and myself. And we are always looking for members, speakers, and sponsors. So be sure to share this event with you or your friends, your fellow data engineers or Cassandra practitioners, or if you or someone you know would like to present, definitely feel free to reach out. Our emails are listed below. We are a part of a larger community. Data Community DC is a diverse and inclusive culture. We support people of all races, genders, sexual orientations, religions, and we expect respect to be given to those parties here as well. You can find out more about Data Community DC at their blog, as well as their upcoming events. And what we cover here is everything related to Cassandra. So this includes the surrounding ecosystem, Cassandra itself, DataStax, all things Cassandra. And if anyone is new and would like to introduce themselves, feel free to do so. We do have some group rules. If you have a question, please ask it. Be polite and courteous to others and share what you know. Oh, was someone going to introduce themselves? I think it was just someone joining. And share what you know. This is meant to be a discussion. Here at Anant, we deal with Cassandra and real-time platforms on a daily basis. And we're happy to provide these discussions and knowledge and share that with you guys. DataStax is also a partner, as well as George Washington University. And these are some of the other program sponsors, as well as organizational sponsors. And if anyone has any jobs, meetups, or hackathons they would like to announce, you can use this as an opportunity to do so. You can drop it in the chat. Or if you want to unmute yourself, feel free. One plug from Anant is we are always hiring for full or part-time positions of data platform operators, engineers, and architects. You can find out more or connect with us at careers.anant.us. And some upcoming events, we'll be going over Meltano for data engineering. That's a sister lunch to Cassandra Lunch that takes place every Monday at noon Eastern time, as well as deploying Cassandra using the DSC operator to Kubernetes. That'll be next week's Cassandra Lunch. You can find all of our events listed at anant.us/events. All of these videos are uploaded and live streamed to YouTube now. So if you want to catch up with any of our past events, or if you're looking for something specific, be sure to check out our videos. We have discussed, again, this is our 77th, so there's a lot of Cassandra content on these playlists, I believe starting at the 10th meetup. So definitely check those out. And Cassandra.Link should be your #1 resource for all things Cassandra. As you can see, even the surrounding ecosystem is listed here. This is a curated resource, and if you have any questions about Cassandra or specifics about all things Cassandra or related to, definitely check out Cassandra.Link. And with that, I will pass the presentation off to Arpan.
Alrighty, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, cool. Can everyone see the slide deck?
Yeah, I can.
Perfect. So just covering some ground rules before I start. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to speak up, or you can drop them in the chat, whichever one you're more comfortable with. So I welcome any feedback or any questions, or if you have any additional knowledge that you would like to share with the community, feel free to do so. So as Josh mentioned, today's topic is going to be on how to connect to DataStax Astra via the standalone CQLSH shell. And so if you're not familiar with the CQLSH shell that DataStax provides, it's a command line shell for remotely interacting with your database via CQL. It requires Python 2.7, so there are some requirements, but generally Python 2.7 is, for the most part, standard. And you can find it via the CQLSH download page, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. And when you're running the CQLSH shell, by default, it connects to like local and then 9042 However, you can specify IP address or the port to connect to a remote DataStax or Cassandra database. And you can do so by running a command like CQLSH and then defining your host name or port. Or if you have some credential layer or SSL, you can also use different flags. So like, for example, if you have username and passwords, your command would be CQLSH flag U for username and then flag P for password. And then you would still identify your host name and port. But for us, because we're looking at Cassandra or Astra, the command you would run is a little bit different. And there's a couple ways where we can connect to Astra via standalone CQLSH, whether that be via like flag U, flag P, flag B for path for the secure connect bundle, or we can use something like a CQLSH RC file and define our variables there that we can then just run, because CQLSH will pick up the defaults from that file if it's in the specific directory. And we'll talk about that once we get to the demo portion. So as mentioned, let me go ahead and open up the downloads page here. So there are different versions of the CQLSH standalone. So the one we're using is DataStax Astra. However, if you click on it, you can also select different versions. So you can do DSC 6.8, 6.7, etc., or DataStax distribution of Apache Cassandra. So just whatever your flavor of DSC is, you can download the compatible version of that. So part of the demo, we'll take a look at it in a second. I've already like downloaded it and tarred it for you. So it's a quick click and plug and chug to get to talk to your DataStax Astra database. However, some of the things I wanted to talk about again were the startup options. So like kind of looking at the different flags. So we won't look at certain ones like color, connect timeout, et cetera, et cetera. So the ones that we're kind of focused on for us outside of flag U, flag P, and flag B is like this flag CQLSH RC. So as mentioned before, it'll default to the file that's in the home/.cassandra file. However, if it's somewhere outside of that, you can point a path to it. So depending on if you want to take what I have for you and then convert it to whatever fits your needs, it's very simple to do so. And then there's also other things we can have. So if you want to run commands straight from the CQLSH, you can do that. But I just wanted to cover this one because the way I have it currently set up, we're not going to use this. Rather, we're just going to move the CQLSH RC file into the default directory that it looks at. So to look at the demo, so what we're going to do is we're going to spin up the repo on Gitpod, and we'll take a look at the code in a second. And we're going to cover two methods in order to use the standalone CQLSH and talk to our Astra database. So the first method is just using a config file plus the flags that we mentioned. So like flag U, flag P, and flag B. And then method B is using CQLSHRC. And so the thing about Gitpod that I'll mention is that the home directory does not persist upon workspace reset. So say if you like log in once on that specific container that Gitpod spins up for you, and you come back to it maybe a day or two later, your workspace directory will persist. However, your home directory won't. And so the way that the default that we talked about, whereas you move the CQLSH RC file into the home directory, currently that's just the way we're going to do it, just because it's simple. However, that's where that flag comes back in, right? The flag CQLSH RC, and then you give it the path. So if you wanted to, you can persist your CQLSH RC file in the workspace directory, so it does persist. And then you can just put that as a part of like maybe a bash command or just manually run it with that flag. However, we're just going to do simple if you want to do it method 1 or method 2. So what we're going to do now is look at the GitHub repository, but we're going to go ahead and open this in Gitpod. So there are some prerequisites for this. So the first requisite is a free Astra account. It's free. They don't ask for a credit card. You'll need to create a client token. We'll take a look at that in a second. And then you also need to download your Secure Connect bundle. And so for the token and the Secure Connect bundle, if you log into your Astra dashboard, so I already have this database spun up from previous demonstrations. So if we click on it, and if we go to the Connect tab, you can find your Connect bundle by generally the way I do it. It's easy for me. I just click on one of the options for connecting using a driver, and just all of them are the same. And all you do is just download the Secure Connect bundle. However, for tokens, what you would need to do is go into your username, go to billing, and then go into token management. And then from token management, you can then create tokens based on what role you're using. I've already created one for an admin user. I already have these credentials on a separate page or copied down. However, it's very easy to create tokens and then trash them as needed. So as soon as this demonstration's over, that token's going to go away. So what we're going to do is go ahead and spin up our Git pod. So the nice thing about Git pod is we can define startup tasks, but then also we can define our environments from the startup, right? And so that way you don't have to worry about OS incompatibilities, right? So this code will work and everything is browser based. So you don't have to download anything to your computer. And with Gitpod, it pretty much works on any mobile device or any device in general. So like I've edited code in a repo that I've spun up on like an iPad, right? And so like I don't know how well it looks or works with mobile phones, but at the very least, a tablet Gitpod will work fine. And so because the repo is pretty small, it spins up pretty fast. And so what you see here is that I already have this command in my Gitpod YAML file that says upon like startup. So in the task, we're going to go ahead and run this bash startup.sh. So what happens in startup.sh is essentially we're saying, are your credentials already existing in the config file? So again, this is method one. This is the creds.config. And so we're saying if your credentials already exist, then go ahead and read the variables from the config file and start up the CQLSH standalone. And we would plug in for username, the client ID, for password, the client secret, and then flag B for the path of the Secure Connect bundle. However, if it's your first time spinning up the container on Gitpod, you can fill in your tokens and then also your path, and then it'll start it up that way. So to do so, I'm going to answer no to this. And so it's going to prompt me for my credentials. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste those in. All right, and now it prompts me to upload my Secure Connect bundle. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that. And I just have to update the name since it's a duplicate. And then all I'm going to do is just copy the path, paste it into my terminal, and then hit enter. And so what I've done in the script is that I save the credentials. So that way, if you do spin up this same like if you restart this specific container, it'll persist for I think 2 weeks, but I think you can extend it for however long you want. Or if you want to commit it and put it in a private repository, all power to you. So if we look at creds.config, we see that our client ID, client secret, and our path went in properly. And then looking back at the terminal here, I can go ahead and increase the size of it. Let's see, where is it's terminal? Oh, see.
Just do like a control plus.
Yeah. Oh, not that terminal. Command. Back one. Okay, so we see that after inputting our credentials here, it started up running CQLSH. So looking at the startup, what it did was it ran a command saying run from the CQLSH Astra directory bin CQLSH, run it with the flags client ID, secret, and path. And so looking at this, we're logged in as the client ID, which matches the token that we created previously. So if I just do a describe key space, oh, nope, sorry, describe tables. So we see a couple tables in here. So some of them are defaults, but then I already have some tables that I created previously, which are the in my key space test. This Chipotle stores, which is a test data that you can upload. So if you don't have any data, but you want to play with DataStax Astra, that you can create your own test data via the options that they have. So what I'd done in a previous webinar, I think with Databricks and Astra, is what I took was I created a notebook that would read data from here, do some ETL on it, and populated a table on called Virginia Beach restaurants, right? And so if I just do select all test.chipotle stores, we get back the data. So within maybe a minute, right, of minus all the talk in between, but spinning up the Git pod, putting in your credentials for the first time, you're able to talk to your DataStax Astra from ideally wherever you want. So what we're going to do now here is we are going to rerun this. So say if I close this out and then I come back to this maybe a day or two later. So my credentials are still saved. And so what I can do is upon startup, that script would run again, right? So what would happen is if I ran bash startup.sh, since my credentials are already in here and my Secure Connect bundle is there as well, if I just press yes, it will go ahead and start up CQLSH by just getting the credentials that exist already in the config file. But I do want to mention that when writing the credentials to the first time, what I do is use a sed replace. So if looking at the template of the config file, I have these brackets for where I want to put the credentials that you input. I use a sed replace and I just do that right away. So that way that does the sed flag I to write the file, and then I point it to wherever it's going. So now if you want to use the CQLSH RC file, so what we have here is we have an INI format, right? So we have the authentication section and then we have the connection section. So I was still in the process of trying to figure out how to do it in a similar way of startup.sh where it'll persist. But again, I ran into that problem of Gitpod doesn't persist the home directory upon restart. So a way to bypass it would to be just to keep the CQLSH RC file in this directory of workspace and then the repo. And so that would then, you would just change the command to run with the flags, flag CQLSH RC, and then you would point to the path of the CQLSH RC file. However, what we're going to do here is very similar. Currently, again, it's just work in progress below of how I can more easily automate it in the future, but just as a straightaway, if you want to do it with CQLSH RC, it's pretty much the same thing. So since we already have the credentials in the config file, we can do a sed replace on it. So we get the variables from the config file, and then we write them into the CQLSH RC. So if I just run bash CQLSH rc.sh, and we see that our value is updated. So moving back to what we need to do to use it, if we look at the README, I'm going to open this in the preview. It'll let me see. Open with preview. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to we need to make a directory. And with Gitpod, if you want to make changes in the home directory, you'll need to attach a sudo to it. It won't ask for a password. So you would just do sudo and then make the directory. So if we go ahead and just paste that, what we're going to do is create the .cassandra directory, and then we're going to move this. We are going to move the CQLSH file from this workspace directory into that home directory that we just created. And then we'll see it go away. And now all we need to do is just run a normal command to start CQLSH. We don't have to have any additional flags because our CQLSH RC file already contains our credentials. So if we go ahead and just run this, we should see our CQLSH pop up, and it's the same client ID that we used previously. And again, if we just do describe tables, we do the same, and then select all from Chipotle store, or no, test.Chipotle stores, and we're still able to access our data. So for the most part, this is just a very simple way of connecting to your DataStax Astra database via standalone CQLSH, ideally remotely from wherever you want, as long as you have the credentials. So I just wanted to make an easy way to do it. Instead of having to download stuff to your local, you can just do this in your browser from wherever you are. And that should wrap up today's demo. But we do have some next actions that I'm working on for this, because I do want to make this better and more available and easier to use for everyone. So some next actions would be to potentially offer an option to use environment variables. So currently this is on a Gitpod setup, but I could potentially pivot and create another way to have it. So that way you can spin this up via Docker, and then you can have your Docker Compose handle all your envs, and then also run your commands, etc. So just working on making this better and easier to use for everyone. So I welcome any input or any suggestions that you guys have. So that way I can mark it down, and we can hopefully make this a tool that's useful and easy to use for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's see, I'm going to pull up the chat, but I don't see any questions. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up, or comments again, if you have any suggestions. Josh, do we have anything from the YouTube side?
No, I was just unmuting myself to point that out. That doesn't look like any questions in the chat or YouTube either. I was kind of curious as to where you see the value in this being. Just, is it just in general to make, schema changes? I don't think you'd want to be like adding data or anything like this, but the access to the CQLSH kind of terminal in your client, I could see as a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you can do via CQLSH, you can do, right? So if you need to do some kind of data operations via CQLSH, this just makes it easy to do it from wherever you want, instead of having to log into Astra and then go to that CQLSH terminal. Or if you have a repo where this could be useful to someone. And then also you can have security layers, right? So currently our token is admin, right? So depending on what security options you have per token, each person's experience might be different, right? So if you want to control who has access to DataStax Astra dashboard, right? And you can be like, okay, I can give you access, I can give you read access to CQLSH, but I don't want to give you access to Astra itself, if that makes sense. So this could be a way for you to potentially give access to your database to remote team members, potentially. Say in our case, right, we're a remote company, but we have a company level, enterprise level DataStax Astra account, right? If you want to give access to certain databases with certain access levels, we can potentially use this and give out access that way, right? So they can still talk to DataStax Astra whatever table. So in the CQLSH file, you can define what key spaces you want in there, but you can also do that via the command line and just put flag K, I believe. And so you can define different parameters and different whatever you need, but then you can still kind of control who has access to the dashboard itself. So I think that might be something helpful for people who work in a big company and need to dole out access, but don't want to dole out access to the dashboard itself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I would also mention that there are CQLSH specific commands that won't work if you're connected via like a driver or something. So commands like describe or CQL copy, those have to happen through SQL shell rather than through a driver. So you could get access to those as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just for Astra. It's technically it's any Cassandra cluster or DataStax enterprise cluster. Have you seen if it works with like ScyllaDB or Cosmos?
I was planning on it. So
Cool.
because as mentioned in the deck, so like I just don't have currently, because I looked at different options, right? So Scylla Cloud. So we could potentially use CQLSH hostname port, right? So I didn't have a spun up like hostname and port that I could talk to as easy as I just did with Astra, since I already had it spun up. But that was something I wanted to look into, because having seen that as I was reading documentation, I was like, I can essentially use this to potentially talk to a key spaces or a Cosmos or a Scylla, depending on what information or variants I'll need. So like if there's certain SSL requirements, but again, that's where kind of you can define all of that running the CQLSH command. So that's definitely something I want to try. But more specifically, today's topic was just on DataStax Astra, but I think we can put that into the queue to see how well we can use this tool or make a fork of it and edit it for different databases in the cloud.
Great.
Ooh, well, thank you everyone for joining. We can probably at this point end the live stream unless there are further questions about the CQLSH and turn it into more of a discussion.